News alert, brand new reaction from the White House from the parents of Otto Warmbier following this week's summit with North Korea. And all of this as Pyongyang now challenges the White House explanation for why the second summit with Kim Jong-un ended without a deal. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. Friday morning, everybody. Welcome. I'm Sandra Smith.
Good morning to you, and good morning to you as well. I'm John Scott in for Bill Hemmer. North Korean officials say they only wanted some sanctions lifted in return for limited action on reducing its nuclear arsenal. The White House, I should say, has said North Korea wanted all sanctions dropped. Mike Emanuel is live at the White House with more. Mike.
Well, John, Sandra, good morning to you. The parents of Otto Warmbier are making it very clear they hold the regime of Kim Jong-un responsible for the death of their son. Otto Warmbier was the University of Virginia student who died after brutal treatment in captivity with the North Koreans. Here's how President Trump handled that issue a short time ago.
He knew the case very well, but he knew it later. And, you know, you got a lot of people, a big country, a lot of people. And in those prisons and those camps, you have a lot of people. And some really bad things happened to Otto. Some really, really bad things.
Why are you willing
But
to call him?
he tells me that he didn't know about it, and I will take him at his word.
Otto's parents, Fred and Cindy, reacting this morning, saying we have been respectful during this summit process. Now we must speak out. Kim and his evil regime are responsible for the death of our son Otto. Kim and his evil regime are responsible for unimaginable cruelty and inhumanity. No excuses or lavish praise can change that. I should also note there were some Republicans on Capitol Hill who are also uncomfortable about the way President Trump handled that issue. Meanwhile, the president is back here at the White House and is tweeting actively about his trip and a variety of issues. The president tweeting this morning, "Great to be back from Vietnam, an amazing place. We had very substantive negotiations with Kim Jong-un. We know what they want and they know what we must have. Relationship very good. Let's see what happens." Here's more from the president on the summit with Fox's Sean Hannity.
This just wouldn't have been good for our country. And frankly, he can look at it the same way. Maybe he can look at it the same way. But we get along really well. He's a different kind of a guy. And I just said, look, this isn't going to be working. So I have a feeling something down the line will happen. And it'll happen. It'll be good.
So the president saying no deal this time, but leaving open the possibility there could be a deal down the road. John?
What is the latest, Mike, on the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and his security clearance? Big article in the New York Times today on that.
Yeah, no question about it. They're saying that the president personally intervened in ordered security clearance. The New York Times with that bombshell report on the front page today. The Times saying that reportedly alarmed senior administration officials, including then White House Chief of Staff John Kelly. Kelly wrote what's described as a contemporaneous internal memo about it. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders says they do not talk about security clearances, but a spokesperson for Kushner's attorney, Abby Lowell, tells Fox News, quote, in 2018, White House and security clearance officials affirmed that Mr. Kushner's security clearance was handled in the regular process with no pressure from anyone. The president has said he did not get involved with the security clearance issue. John?
All right, more to come on that, I'm sure. Mike Emanuel at the White House. Mike, thanks.
Let's turn to Chris Wallace now, anchor of Fox News Sunday. Where do we go with this story, and where does it go from here, Chris?
You're talking about the Kushner security
Yes.
story?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is a subject that the House Democrats were already planning to investigate, the whole question of how security clearances have been given out by the Trump White House. According to the New York Times, there were contemporaneous memos because they were so upset that reportedly the president ordered them to give this top secret clearance to Kushner, that both the then chief of staff, John Kelly, and the then White House counsel, Donald McGahn, wrote down memorandums stating that they had opposed this and the president had ordered them to do it. And I would think that there's probably a congressional subpoena in their future, probably in the House Oversight Committee, much like Michael Cohen, to testify as to whether or not it's true.
We just spoke to Kellyanne Conway, getting fresh White House reaction. She was at CPAC. Little hard to hear, but we wanted to get fresh White House reaction to this story this morning. Here's how she responded, Chris.
We don't discuss security clearances. I'm not even going to discuss my own. But I will tell you that the president has the absolute right to do what was described, but we're not going to discuss that. I will tell you, as these stories are breaking, Jared Kushner was over in the Middle East working on behalf of the president, on behalf of this country.
But of course, the left is quick to point out, or any critics of this administration, that we have heard the president's daughter, Ivanka Trump, comment on her husband's security clearance, saying that the president was not involved, and the president himself has said he wasn't involved. So they commented in the past on this. Now the White House response is that there is no response.
I would have to call what Kellyanne Conway said there a classic non-denial denial. When she says we don't talk about this, as you point out quite rightly, Sandra, they have talked about it in the past. If it were false, if in fact the president hadn't been involved, I can't imagine they wouldn't say that. They have no qualms about saying when news is fake, when reporting they think is inaccurate. They're not saying that about this story, so I think that speaks for itself.
Meanwhile, moving on to North Korea and the words of the president when there, saying that he takes Kim Jong-un at his word over not knowing at the time about the treatment of Otto Warmbier. We also asked Kellyanne Conway about the latest statement from the family. She responded after just talking to the president with this.
Well, respectfully, Senator Graham doesn't know that, and I'm telling you what the president just told me, because that's where I work. And the president said that, of course, he agrees with the Warmbier family. North Korea is responsible for the death of their son. He's always said that will not change. What he believes Chairman Kim to have said is that he was not aware of what had happened to Otto Warmbier when it happened. I'm relaying to you what Chairman...
The White House sticking by the president's words that he's taking Kim Jong-un at his word, that he didn't know at the time, but does indeed hold North Korea responsible for Otto Warmbier's death.
This strikes me as just a completely unforced error by the president and the White House. Why, on an issue like this, there's no question that Otto Warmbier was brutally tortured, basically killed by the North Koreans. Why on earth would you side with Kim Jong-un over the Warmbier family in the sense of outrage? I mean, first of all, there's a real question whether the captivity and the incarceration of an American is something that the dictator of North Korea wouldn't know about. But even if that's true, why would you want to get into this fight? The fact is the North Korean regime was responsible. You're getting pushback now from the Warmbier family. You're getting pushback from the president's former UN ambassador, Nikki Haley, who says that she holds the Kim regime responsible. And you had a lot of Republicans, Senate Republicans yesterday, like Cory Gardner of Colorado, say that Otto Warmbier's blood is on Kim Jong-un's hands. So I just don't understand why you'd even get into this and make it sound like in any way you're siding with Kim and saying that he is somehow to be held blameless for what happened to Otto Warmbier.
We put together a list this morning of those Senate Republicans. Rob Portman was one of them, warning the president not to be naive about the brutal nature of the North Korean regime. Lindsey Graham suggesting that maybe the president was trying to leave some space to negotiate when he said this. Susan Collins surprised that the president would accept those words at face value. We will continue to watch all of this. I'm sure you will as well. Chris Wallace, you'll have more on the second Trump-Kim summit this Sunday. You will be joined by, Chris, National Security Advisor John Bolton Sunday.
Yes, indeed, and plenty to talk about. North Korea, and we'll obviously ask him also about the Warmbier controversy, what's going on in Venezuela, Afghanistan, possibility of a peace deal there. Lots to talk about with the National Security Advisor. He was on the ground in North Korea. Now, the big question is, despite, the issue as to the terms of how it broke down, where do we go from here? Are negotiations basically over, or is there possibility of future progress? Because at this point, Kim Jong-un has his entire nuclear arsenal, no testing, but he has kept the arsenal that the president was so upset about, with no sign that he's going to give it up.
We'll be watching it all this weekend. Fox News Sunday. Chris Wallace, thank you.
You bet, Sandra.
Meanwhile, the Pentagon says no military construction projects will be canceled to pay for the president's long-promised border wall. This after President Trump announced a national emergency that allows him to tap into military funds. Jennifer Griffin is live from the Pentagon with that. Jennifer.
John, President Trump is trying to assure lawmakers ahead of a crucial Senate vote on his declaration of a national emergency that he is not going to rob Pentagon coffers to pay for the border wall and affect readiness. Yesterday at an Air Force base in Alaska, he vowed to add more military construction money to next year's budget request, the funds he plans to borrow from to build the wall.
The fact is, we've increased your budget from not too much to $700 billion. And then from $700 billion, we went up to $716 billion. And I won't tell you this year's surprise, but the generals are going to be very happy when they hear, because it's going up yet again. Because we have no choice. You know, I'm a cost cutter, but we have no choice. Without a military, what do we have?
Acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Joe Dunford, visited the border last weekend to see how the military can help secure the border. Under the national emergency, the president plans to have the Pentagon reallocate $3.6 billion from already appropriated military construction funds. This week, a defense official testified to a House Armed Services subcommittee that payment for these military construction projects would be deferred, not canceled.
I want to assure you that no currently authorized military construction projects will be canceled to fund military construction projects supporting use of the armed forces at the southern border.
Democrats on the subcommittee balked, saying this is simply a backdoor, possibly unconstitutional means to bypass Congress. John?
All right, Jennifer Griffin there at the Pentagon. Thank you.
Embattled Venezuelan officials turning to a key ally for help as the country's political and humanitarian crisis spirals downward. A live report from Caracas straight ahead.
Plus, another day of testimony from Michael Cohen in the books. Now, House Intel Committee members are hinting at new information in their probe of Russian election interference. Congressman Chris Stewart is on that committee, and he joins us next.
There's not much I can say. Other than it was very productive. As I said, I'm committed to telling the truth, and I will be back on March 6th to finish up. There's more to discuss.
Cummings made so eloquently that he needed to tell us the full truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. None of the questions we had for him went unanswered.
The House Intelligence Committee questioning Michael Cohen for nearly 8 hours in a closed-door session yesterday, ending with the promise of him returning to the Hill next week. Now, some lawmakers are hinting at new information that could prove relevant in the panel's investigation into Russian election interference. Let's bring in House Intelligence Committee member Chris Stewart. Good to have you here this morning. So what new information could be relevant?
Well, I got to tell you that the vast majority of this hearing was just a rehearing of everything that we've heard before, not just from Mr. Cohen, but more broadly as well. The format is quite a bit different, and it's much more informative. Rather than 5 minutes for all these Congress people who take 4.5 minutes to give a speech and maybe ask a question at the end, each side, the majority and the minority, are given an hour, and we alternate back and forth, and anyone can speak, and you can speak or ask questions for as long as you want and bore down on certain lines of questioning. So it's much more informative. But if people are trying to present the impression that there was some dramatic new revelation or some dramatic thing that's going to lead to the president's impeachment or further legal jeopardy, I got to tell you that I just don't think that's true. And I can't go into details on the committee, but I can say this, that almost everything was things that almost everyone knows. And too often, everyone's chasing this new accusation, this new bombshell, this new revelation, and then, you know, many times nothing comes of it. And I think that's probably about where we are right now.
What was your conclusion that you were able to draw about any collusion that Michael Cohen knew about with the president in Russia?
Well, he was very, very clear in our committee, but I won't speak about that, but I will speak what he said in the previous day's hearing. He was very clear. I have no direct evidence. I have no evidence that there was any collusion or conspiracy. We asked him every possible which way we could. And you kind of, again, bore down on this deal. Well, I had my suspicions. Well, what are your suspicions, and are they based on any evidence? There is no evidence. And I think, frankly, anyone who's trying to craft the narrative that the president colluded with Russians during the election, anyone who's still saying that, I think they've just lost their minds. They're so tempered by their dislike, and frankly, sometimes hatred for this president, that they're willing to believe almost anything. I think most reasonable people have put that aside. But there are other things we want to talk about, and some of it you have to filter through this lens of, is he telling us the truth now? What is his motive for being here and saying these things? But he was very clear, and he's been very clear.
I know you're not commenting on
evidence.
I know you're not commenting on specifically what happened behind closed doors yesterday, but will we see a transcript of that publicly eventually?
Well, I hope so. I think we should. And I've made this argument for a long time. This isn't national security. This is a political process here. And most of this should be transparent and open to the public.
All right. As far as potential headaches for the White House and what's to come here, and Michael Cohen returning to the Hill next week after Adam Schiff said, quote, "We had a long day, but it wasn't a long enough day." Chris Christie was on Fox and Friends earlier this morning saying that this sets things up so that plenty of others could be called in. Watch this.
What he really did yesterday was create a whole bunch of additional witnesses that the House is now empowered to try to bring before them. Folks like Alan Weisselberg at the Trump Organization, who he must have mentioned a dozen times. The president's children, who he said was involved in the hush money payments and others, right? So what he did yesterday was set all that up.
So manage our expectations based on that thinking.
Well, look, it didn't matter whether Mr. Cohen did that or someone else did that. The Democrats' intention is for this investigation to go through 2020 into the next election. There's no question about it. And if they don't find evidence of collusion, which they haven't, or obstruction, which they haven't, then they'll look for something else. And so whether Mr. Cohen gave them the opportunity to go after other witnesses or someone else did, it's very clear that that's what they're going to do, and they'll find a way to do it. And I think, by the way, most Americans just think that's fundamentally unfair. You have no accusations of wrongdoing on the financial side. You have no accusations that Donald Trump's children have done anything wrong. But they're saying, well, we're just going to go look and look and look, and we'll find something. And I think most people just think that's as I said, fundamentally unfair.
All right. We appreciate you coming on and talking about that this morning on the House Intelligence Committee. A lot more to come on this. Congressman Stewart, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, this Fox News alert, some new details on the links between Hamas and Iran. How Tehran might be helping stoke tensions along the border between Gaza and Israel. We'll take you live to Jerusalem. Also, Democratic infighting, the threat from Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for moderate Democrats who vote with Republicans. That's ahead.
It's unfortunate where you hear about diversity from AOC and others in their conference. Obviously, I guess doesn't include diversity of thought.
Do I use a toothpaste that whitens my teeth or one that's good for my teeth? Now I don't have to choose.
From Crest 3D White, the whitening therapy collection, now with charcoal or coconut oil. It gently whitens, plus it has a fortifying formula to protect your enamel. Crest, healthy, beautiful smiles for life.
I'm feeling good.
Make the most of your business card with Vistaprint.
I'm feeling good.
500 standard cards start at just $9.99 with code BC Now.
I'm feeling good.
Own the now with Vistaprint.
If you're a veteran paying $1,500 or more a month in rent, New Day's Operation Home can help you buy a home for what you're paying now in rent. And you won't need a down payment because at New Day, your service is your down payment. And every day, New Day helps veterans buy a home without spending $1 out of pocket for closing costs. No down payment, not $1 out of pocket for closing costs. Why rent when you can buy?
Go to operationhome.com or call 1-855-227-8524.
I love you, Dad.
What? I found myself saying that all the time. And when I realized it, I just stopped saying it. And my life changed. I stayed home, mostly alone. I missed out on everything. I knew that I needed hearing aids, but the cost was ridiculous. A tiny hearing aid costs $3,000, $5,000, whatever they can get. It's just ridiculous. Well, not anymore. Thanks to Hearing Assist, I can hear clearly again, and my life is so much better. I got a pair of rechargeable state-of-the-art digital hearing aids for about 10 times less than my doctor wanted to charge. You can't see them, and I never have to change the batteries because they're rechargeable. And right now, you can buy 2 Recharge hearing aids and have 60 days to try them. Call 800-640-7000 or visit hearingassist.com, 800-640-7000.
Matt Gaetz speaks out on the story. His controversial Cohen tweet, apology, and take on the Capitol Hill testimony. Martha has the exclusive interview tonight.
Looking back, you've seen some amazing things. And looking forward, there's so much more to come. That's why VSP offers individual vision plans, coverage you can buy on your own, because retirement shouldn't be the end of vision care, but a new beginning. VSP gives you affordable access to trusted eye doctors in your area and gives you the lowest out-of-pocket costs on necessities that traditional Medicare doesn't cover, like glasses, contacts, and specialty prescription lenses. This makes regular eye exams more affordable, trusted eye doctors more accessible, and ensures that prescriptions, like Progressives, are done right the first time. For lifelong access to eyewear and eye care, put your trust in the same quality coverage employers offer and learn more at vspdirect.com or call 888-8BY-VSP to see better for life for less.
Thank you, VSP.
Hamas, the militant group in control of the Gaza Strip, says Iran is giving them weapons and money. Tensions are high on the border as weekly protests press Israel to lift a 12-year-long blockade. Trey Yingst is following that conflict from Jerusalem. Trey.
John, as tensions do remain high between Israel and Gaza, Hamas, the group in control of the Gaza Strip, does tell Fox News they receive weapons and money from Iran, among other countries. Speaking this week in Gaza City, senior Hamas official Ghazi Hamid explained that Hamas remains prepared for a war with Israel and gets support for their efforts from organizations and countries around the world. The Israeli government and military have expressed concern that Iran is entrenching itself in places like Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza to ultimately launch a two-front war against Israel. Inside Gaza, the influence of Iran is no longer being hidden.
I think Iran tried to help. No, it's not a secret. To help Hamas, to have other Palestinian faction, to supply, provide him with money and maybe weapons. Because we don't use this, for example, as Hamas. We are just working to liberate our homeland.
That's the first time we hear Hamas admitting that they receive money and weapons from Iran. Hamid stressed that weekly border demonstrations are the priority for Hamas, and they would like to avoid a war if possible. Today marks the 49th Friday in a row that thousands of Palestinians gathered along the Israel-Gaza border to protest the Israeli blockade on the Gaza Strip. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, at least 9 people have been injured so far by live Israeli ammunition. Some of the things the demonstrators are asking for include more electricity, access to clean water, and ability to travel from Gaza. Now, John, we also sat down this week with the second largest group inside the Gaza Strip, Islamic Jihad. That group also confirming that they receive direct support from the Iranian regime in Tehran, comparing their relationship with Iran to the relationship that America has with Israel. John?
Trey Yingst, live from Jerusalem. Thank you.
Michael Cohen headed back to the Hill next week after a marathon grilling that spanned 3 days. Is impeaching President Trump the endgame for Democrats? Kimberly Strassel of the Wall Street Journal joins us next on that.
Plus, SpaceX preparing for a new mission. Why this launch could change the trajectory of manned space travel.
Fox News alert: Venezuela's vice president turning to a key ally, Russia, for help amid a growing political and humanitarian crisis in that country. This as the U.S. keeps up the pressure on disputed President Nicolas Maduro to step down. Steve Harrigan is live in Caracas with more on that. Steve?
Sandra, you're right to point out that this battle for power in Venezuela is certainly taking on some Cold War overtones, with Russia backing one leader and the U.S. and many other countries backing the other. That played out in the UN Security Council yesterday. the U.S. putting forward a resolution that would call for new free and fair presidential elections here in Venezuela. That UN resolution vetoed by Russia. In the meantime, opposition Juan Guaido is in Paraguay today. He was in Brazil yesterday, Colombia before that. But the real question is whether he can get himself back into Venezuela. The Maduro regime here has put a travel ban on him. He could face arrest when he comes back here. He couldn't get humanitarian aid in the country, but now he's got to get himself back in the country. When he does, he says he'll be back by Monday. He says he'll begin executing all the duties of the president. It's not clear how he's going to do that with the military and police still firmly under Maduro control. As far as U.S. sanctions go, they are hitting Venezuela's economy hard. Output of oil, the exports are down 40% in just the 1 month of U.S. sanctions. It's not clear, though, whether that's going to be enough to force Nicolas Maduro from office. Sandra, back to you.
Steve Harrigan in Venezuela for us. Thank you.
And impeachment is a divisive issue in our country. And let us see what the facts are, what the law is, and what the behavior is of the president.
That's House Speaker Nancy Pelosi tamping down talk of impeachment proceedings against the president after the president's former attorney, Michael Cohen, makes explosive claims during 3 days of testimony on Capitol Hill. Kim Strassel is an editorial board member at the Wall Street Journal, also a Fox News contributor. It doesn't seem that Nancy Pelosi wants to talk about impeachment. Kim, why not?
Well, look, I think the issue here is that despite all of the immense attention that was leveled on the Cohen hearings and all of the news reports suggesting that there was bombshell testimony, Ms. Pelosi is very wise. She understands that the American people are not going to be very impressed with an impeachment proceeding that's based on a guy who's already been, convicted and sentenced for lying to Congress. And really, when it comes down to it, the best he had to offer in terms of a crime was a campaign finance violation. So they understand, Democrats understand, the wiser heads in the party, that they are going to have to come up with something a lot more strong if they want to convince Americans that impeachment proceedings are in any way valid.
I want to play again something that Michael Cohen said after he emerged from one of his rounds of congressional testimony. Listen to this, and then I have a question for you afterwards. Listen.
There's not much I can say other than it was very productive. As I said, I'm committed to telling the truth, and I will be back on March 6th to finish up. There's more to discuss.
Okay, he says it was very productive. That's kind of interesting from a witness. I mean, witnesses aren't supposed to be grinding an axe here. They're supposed to be providing testimony. What was productive about what he had to say?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, how can you not watch Michael Cohen and not feel as though he does indeed have an axe to grind here, right? I mean, he worked for a guy for 10 years. Now he's doing everything he can to take him down. You can look into the motives of why he wants to do that, but I think the agenda is pretty clear. I think it's also important to look at the way Democrats are looking at Michael Cohen in terms of what they feel he can give them. Remember, we think we're maybe about a week or two away from the end of Mueller's report. After 2 years, a lot of the things that Democrats have been saying were potentially collusion, all of these names, Manafort, Carter Page. It doesn't look as though, we don't know yet, but it doesn't look as though there is going to be such a claim in Special Counsel Mueller's report. So they're looking ahead, and so apparently a lot of what Cohen was providing them and they were interested in yesterday was their new theory of collusion, which is that this centers on President Trump's financial dealings with Russia, in particular the Trump Tower in Moscow.
Jim Jordan, the congressman from Ohio, says that he's pretty convinced that Democrats still want to begin impeachment proceedings against the president. Listen to this.
They're going to do it. It's a crazy plan that they have, but they're going to do it. It is no accident that Tom Steyer was in New York last week organizing a town hall in Chairman Nadler's district, and this week was in Baltimore organizing a town hall in Chairman Cummings' district. Tom Steyer, mega donor for the Democrats, they are going to do it. That's how radical they have become.
Tom Steyer, yes, the Silicon Valley billionaire who funds a lot of liberal causes. Is he, in fact, going to push Democrats to impeach the president?
Well, Jim Jordan has put his finger on the single most important aspect of this, which is the base, the progressive ascendant base, the resistance. They will demand this from Democrats. And whether it's Tom Steyer, who has a lot of money, whether it's the grassroots out there, they will consider this to be a basic function of the House majority that they just elected. So this is why, Ms. Pelosi has been trying to tamp down this talk. But I agree with Congressman Jordan. I do not see any way in which Democrats do not engage in impeachment in one way or another going forward, because they will feel as though if they want re-election, they want the White House. That's something they have to do.
And what is the political result of that? Can you gaze into your crystal ball?
Well, look, I do think that they're going to have something that is going to be a lot stronger than what Michael Cohen gave. And, and they've got an even bigger problem if the special counsel comes back and he doesn't have all of these things they've been predicting for 2 years. That's why you see Adam Schiff, the head of the House Intelligence Committee, going down yet now a new avenue. Supposedly it's financial crimes. They have to gin up something much more spectacular to convince the American public. Otherwise, as much as their base wants it, the broad general public is going to reject that, and it could make them in even bigger trouble in the election.
Interesting times ahead. Kim Strassel, Fox News contributor and Wall Street Journal editorial board member. Thanks, Kim.
Well, the presidential field for Democrats getting even more crowded. Washington Governor Jay Inslee announcing this morning that he is running. Dan Springer's live in Seattle with more. Dan.
Hi, Sandra. In announcing his bid for the presidency today, Jay Inslee becomes the first governor to join the crowded race, and he's about as close to a single-issue candidate as you can get. It's all about climate change for him. In the Twitter video released today, Inslee shows clips of him talking about climate change early in his political career. He was a Washington state legislator and longtime congressman before getting elected governor 6 years ago. In 2007, Inslee co-authored a book titled Apollo's Fire, in which he wrote that, quote, coal is killing us. He wants to transform the economy and make it carbon free. His campaign slogan appears to be, "This is our moment."
I'm Jay Inslee, and I'm running for president because I'm the only candidate who will make defeating climate change our nation's #1 priority.
But during his time as governor, he doesn't have any signature wins on his #1 issue. None of his climate goals have been achieved. Statewide greenhouse gas emissions are 8% above 1990 levels. They rose 6% over his first term in office. He opposed a revenue-neutral carbon tax initiative that was favored by economists, then backed a carbon tax that was a big tax increase. Both were soundly defeated by voters. Even when he's had Democratic majorities in the state House and Senate, he hasn't been able to push through his expensive carbon-reducing agenda.
And it's now actually higher than when he started in office. So for a state that claims to be a climate leader, we're actually going in the wrong direction.
Inslee's candidacy will test how much voters care about climate change. In a January Pew survey, it ranked 3rd among Democratic voters, but among all voters, it was way down to 8th. In the most important issue category. Among another big challenge, raising money. His 5-month-old Vision PAC has received just $242,000 in donations, nearly all from his home state. He needs money to raise his national profile. In a recent poll of Democrats in or exploring a run for presidency in 2020, Inslee came in last at 0%. Sandra?
The list growing longer. Dan Springer, thank you.
Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York has a warning for moderate Democrats who vote alongside moderate Republicans, or really any Republicans. Republican Congressman Doug Collins weighs in on what some are calling a threat. That's next.
Prestige creams not living up to the hype. One jar.
Those Democrats who are breaking ranks, they don't view AOC as their boss. They don't want to be called a puppet of Nancy Pelosi. They make that decision. Now they have to make a decision as far as future votes that come up as well, whether or not they're going to be their own man, their own woman, or they're going to end up getting on board with AOC and her agenda as if she is their boss.
New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez reportedly warning moderate Democrats their names will be added to a list of primary targets if they vote with Republicans. This after more than 24 Democrats voted for a Republican amendment in a gun control bill. Joining us now is a Georgia Congressman, Doug Collins, ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman, thank you for being here this morning. So what do you make of this warning?
Glad to be here.
This reported warning from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to her colleagues.
Well, it's amazing to me. Number one, I did not know she was co-speaker with Nancy Pelosi, but undoubtedly she has risen to that rank of threatening people who don't follow the party line or her liberal socialist agenda. It's interesting to me also, though, that when I first went to Congress, I was always told that I was representing the district in which I came from. In fact, by the way, those are the only people that have cast votes for me. And so when to have the speaker and to have the another freshman tell me that I'm going to be threatened with a primary or I'm going to have support withheld, that's a really scary proposition for these members who are trying to represent their districts. And, you know, we're going to see what's happening. They have trouble with their own agenda. I can't help it if they put bad law up to be voted on. They're the ones putting that up, not us.
Well, this was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez taking it a step further from Nancy Pelosi, who said, quote, "We are either a team or we are not, and we have to make that decision." What does this tell you about their party heading into 2020?
It tells me that they're completely fractured. It tells me that, and also it's very concerning, and frankly, just from another perspective, I think the Ethics Committee would be interested that a lot of this conversation about support from the DCCC and also being primaried was discussed inside the Capitol. So this is, there's issues here that we're seeing it boil over to where they don't know what their agenda is. They can't keep everybody on the same page. So looking ahead to 2020, what is their agenda? They have one. They're furious at this president, and they're mad about the direction of the country, which the economy is actually doing well. That's going to be very difficult for them to maintain as they go through the next 18 months if all you're doing is trying to fly with blind rage and everybody have to walk the same line.
But she has proven, and going back to Ocasio-Cortez, she has proven to have some star power in her own party, and she faces some criticism within the Democrats that have come out and spoken out against some of her very, very far left-leaning policies. But you've seen a lot of support for the Green New Deal, for example.
It is amazing to me how in this day of politics that it is more about the appearance and flash than it is the substance. I have no problem with her doing whatever she wants to do as far as her, you know, appealing to a new generation, reaching out on Instagram or Twitter. That's fine with me. What bothers me is what she's actually advocating for. The new Green Deal, which is a completely unworkable $93 trillion plan by one estimate. It also affects me when I start looking at the socialist tendencies, and also ask New York City how they're feeling right now about having jobs that are left from Amazon, when she also then said, again, a policy statement here said, we'll spend the $3 billion on infrastructure. She didn't even understand that it wasn't $3 billion sitting in the bank. It was about the jobs that were coming and the tax credits going to be offered. I have a problem with her policies. She can be a star all she wants to be, but I think in our party, I would rather be a star on policy than a star on flash.
All right, so that being said, how do Republicans run against this?
We keep pointing toward the policies. We keep pointing out the fact that on this week on gun legislation, which they wanted to promote, it will not do what they said it was going to do. In fact, it was actually perpetuating a fraud on victims of mass violence because it won't do what they said it would do. It also has problems. When we look at policy, we can make a case to the American people that the economy is doing well because we passed good legislation. The economy is doing well because of tax reform. The economy is doing well because of the president and deregulation. Our world standing is improved because the president has taken a strong stand across the world. We go back to what we do best, and that is making sure that the policy is right and making sure we communicate it. That's what we've got to do better on. In fact, I'm encouraging my Republican colleagues to do better on messaging, going home and making sure people understand why our policies are better and why their policies will actually hurt us.
Congressman Doug Collins, thank you.
It's always good to be with you.
All right, thank you.
Well, the private space company SpaceX could end up making history this weekend. Details on the launch that might change the future of manned spaceflight forever. That's next.
These vehicles have 50 years of technological upgrades over the older vehicles. So this is a major change in the capabilities and the cost of these vehicles to operate.
The wake of Michael Cohen's testimony potentially targeting President Trump's business associates and his family. Will this pay off for Democrats? Can they legislate and investigate at the same time? And how will voters react?
Plus, Hillary Clinton speaks out on likability, double standards for female candidates. Did she pave the way for the multiple women now vying to do what she could not do?